today. We are celebrating the library's 100th anniversary this year and invite you to pick up a copy of The Town of Leesburg Celebrates Thomas Balch Library's 100 Years. It's on there. Copies of the Balch column listing the library's programs, classes, tours, and exhibits is on the table in the back of the room, along with other informative literature about the library and the Friends. The events are posted on our website and on social media. The fall newsletter, as well as back issues, may be read in their entirety on our website. And we'd like to thank the Friends for underwriting our programs. We receive grant monies from them to pay the honorarium. The water fountain is to the left. The restrooms are straight back on either side of the door. Electronic devices, if any of you have them at this time, any kind of electronic device, we would ask that you either turn it off or mute it at this time. While masks are not required, if anyone present would like to have one and forgot to bring it, please let me know. We're happy to provide them. Thomas Balch Library is privileged to have received the collected papers of Elaine Thompson, a well-known and highly respected local educator, historian, author, and community activist. It is my pleasure to welcome our speakers, Laura Christensen, Curator of Manuscripts and Archives, and Megan Glassbrenner, Project Archivist, as they share with you details and tidbits from Thompson's collections about people, places, and events in Loudoun County. And yes, you heard me right, collections. We divided her papers into several collections. So please join me in welcoming Laura and Megan as we remember Elaine Thompson.
Thank you very much for coming out on such a rainy weekend. I'm excited that we have people come out. I was a little worried with the weather. I would like to thank you all for joining us today because I'm very, very excited to have the opportunity to honor Elaine E. Thompson, a Loudoun native, historian, educator, writer, leader, community activist, daughter, sister, and friend. As well as to unveil these amazing collections, which her work, her persistence in uncovering, collecting, and preserving and sharing Loudoun history made possible. It truly is a wealth of information that was too much to make one collection. We had to split it up. And I was, yeah, if you would hit the lights. We're also trying two things here, bridging the past with the future. This is the first time, I think, in a class like this, a live class in person, we've used this screen. So hopefully you will bear with me if anything goes wrong. Hopefully it won't. Also, I'd like to say that we are recording this presentation. The audience will not be filmed, but it will be available if technology works out and is willing online afterward. And I know that I have a small voice and I will try to enunciate and speak as eloquently as Elaine, but I will probably not make it. Those of you who may not have heard her speak, you'll see later what I mean. I aspire to it. So a short history of the collections we will explore today. They are the culmination of close to 6 years of work by Thomas Balch Library staff to process, catalog, and digitize materials collected by Elaine Thompson and her family. And many, many people had a hand in making it possible to preserve these materials and make them available for researchers. I'd like to briefly acknowledge as many of them as I can. I'm bound to forget somebody, so I apologize in advance for that. Please tell me if you know that I've left somebody out. Looking at you, Alexandra. In October 2016, following Elaine's passing, her sister Mildred Nichols contacted the library about her papers, which Elaine had made clear that she would like to have some come to the library. She and other members, Mildred and other members of her family, in Elaine's family and friends, invited Gabrielle Sanchez, who was then an archivist and library associate at Thomas Balch Library, and myself, into Elaine's home and office, where we found many of her research files, papers, books, and many other wonderful things sorted and waiting for us, which was wonderful, prepared by Elaine to go to the library. These included photographs, documents, and records related to the Loudoun Emancipation Association and to the Clark, Thompson, and related families, as well as 4 cubic boxes of research materials compiled by Elaine in the course of her historical research and writing career. That wasn't all though. In 2 subsequent trips back to her home in May 2017, we also collected 136 books, which was far less than we would have liked to have taken, but we can't take everything, unfortunately, and 7 cubic feet of additional materials. Altogether 11 cubic feet when we first got these things, which is quite big for a Thomas Balch Library collection. These included additional archival and photographic materials and some surprises that we weren't quite expecting. After a preliminary survey of the collections with Thomas Balch Library Director Alexandra Gressett, she was joined with me along with support from Assistant Town Manager Keith Markle, Thomas Balch Advisory Commission Chair Jim Hirschman, and Black History Committee of the Friends of Thomas Balch Library Chair Donna Bohannon, in supporting an application for the Clarence L. Roby Charitable Trust. And we were successful in our grant application. They provided two different runs of funding to get the processing of this collection started. We're very grateful to that. Mildred Nichols and Deborah Lee also assisted in preparing materials for this grant application and in providing background information about Elaine's life and work that has been helpful throughout the processing. I lost my place. Additional funding was received from the Mildred T. Nichols Trust and later from the Loudoun Library Foundation. And without this funding, this processing would not be completed today. So it made it incredibly possible to get this work done. Once underway, the processing of the collection was undertaken by several Thomas Balch Library staff members. Alexandra and I both played a role, but we are also really in the debt of processors, including Stephanie Steele Walters, Kelly Arford Horn, and Maria Cristina Marina for actually doing a lot of the processing work. They did excellent work that made this possible. In January of 2022, we were also extremely fortunate to welcome Megan Glassbrenner as an intern from Catholic University, where she was completing her graduate program in library science. Yes. There's Masters of Library and Information Science. Okay, and NL something. Megan has done extremely excellent work processing and cataloging the extensive photographic materials in the collection, which really is a gem of Elaine's papers. She has done outstanding work, and I hope you will look forward to hearing her about her discoveries and work later in this presentation. Finally, we have received significant help from the Black History Committee and the members of the larger community of people who knew Elaine and her family, and including her family, to begin work on identifying many of the photographs in the collection. Specifically, I want to acknowledge the help of Muriel Green and Jim Roberts, who did extensive footwork finding people who could identify people in the first set of photos we gathered for identification. Thanks to the people that they identified in those photos, Megan was able to get started identifying hundreds and hundreds of other photos. And we still have more of that work to do. It's going to continue, and I hope today's presentation will give you an idea of how important this work is in terms of identifying people in the photographs. So, for those of you who may not have met or known Elaine, a brief introduction is in order. And I think probably surveying the audience, many of you did know Elaine, but just in case. Elaine Eppie Thompson was born on the 20th of September, 1932, to Thomas E. Thompson Sr. and Lillian Clark Thompson. Elaine and her siblings, Mildred, Dolores, and Thomas Thompson Jr., were born and raised in Percival, and here you can see a really lovely family photo of the family when the kids were all a good bit young. So she attended a segregated elementary school in Percival and graduated from Douglas High School in Leesburg, Virginia, as part of the class of 1950. She attended and graduated from the Hampton Institute, now Hampton University. In 1955, she obtained her BS in English, and later she would get an MS in education from Hampton. Elaine taught English for over 30 years. She was one of 2 Black teachers who were the first to join the faculty of an all-formerly white high school in Easton in Talbot County, Maryland. In the classroom, she shared her love of writing with her students. And just a little bit of photograph and a quote of Elaine's from when she was about her time at Douglas. She was a lifetime member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and as a leader of the Talbot County branch of the NAACP, she really shaped a lot of the efforts there during her time in Maryland. In 1988, she received the NAACP's President's Award at its national convention. She continued to be an active and leading member in the NAACP after retiring to live in Hamilton, Virginia. And she was awarded Virginia NAACP's Marie Medley Civil Rights Award in 2000. Also in 2000, Thompson served as a founding member of the Black History Committee of the Friends of the Thomas Balch Library. The Black History Committee was created to preserve, collect, and promote and share the history of African Americans who contributed to the emergence and development of Loudoun County. Thompson contributed to the committee's efforts in numerous ways, including collaborating to create A Journey Through Time, events affecting African Americans in Loudoun County in 2006, and serving as co-chair of the publishing committee for 2 books, The Essence of the People, Volumes 1 and 2. She also contributed the essays on Samuel Thompson, James Hicks, and William Billy Pierce to Volume 2. And you'll hear a little bit more about her work with that later today. In 2005, she published In the Watchfires, the Loudoun County Emancipation Association, 1890 through 1971, documenting the history of the Loudoun Emancipation Association, an organization in which many of her family members played active roles. In the Watchfires was both a history and a family memoir. In this, in many ways, in doing both history of Loudoun County and the nation at large, and also her family's history, and combining these two and into narratives that help people access and learn about the past. This is a theme that is true of much of Elaine Thompson's work and many of the papers that are in her collections. And we've tried to sort of mirror this in how we've arranged them. She grew up surrounded by family. Both her mother and her father's families have long histories in Loudoun County, and Thompson shared a love of genealogy with both her parents and her siblings. Her papers included genealogical research and materials compiled by her related to numerous families, not just the Clark and Thompson families, but also the Cooks, the Trammels, and countless others. I can't even go into the list, it's long. In 2016, Elaine donated her third great-grandfather, Joseph Trammell's 1852 Certificate of Freedom papers and the 10 box that he made to protect them to the permanent collection of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, where it's still on view today. This is one of her last accomplishments and an act that sums up her dedication to preserving the past and sharing it with future generations. And here you can see, this is from the National Museum of African American History and Culture's website, their catalog online, both the document and the case, but I thought it would be nice to see a little bit of the interview that Elaine gave for CBS News when she donated it. Oh, no. We're definitely gonna see it.
You can pick up this and touch it and know that it was in his hands. Now, doesn't that send a chill down your back?
It does.
Yeah.
This freedom paper belonged to Joseph Trammell of Loudoun County, Virginia. He was the great-great-great-grandfather of 83-year-old Elaine Thompson. Trammell protected his freedom using this 10 box, knowing the paper held his only proof that he was no longer enslaved, no longer someone's property.
As long as he had this, they could not enslave him. Not easily, anyway.
His freedom paper.
I know this was an event, a sort of capstone event that meant a lot to Elaine. And one of the things that I pulled out today that you can see is the invitation to the opening of the museum, which is actually, it's a beautiful invitation. It's really nicely done. We also have in the collection her research into Joseph Trammell and her correspondence with the Smithsonian and other institutions about this donation. So when we talk about 3 collections, why 3? And actually, it's probably going to end up being more than 3 because Megan pointed out some postcards that we're going to make another collection on Friday that I had forgotten about. So in her work, Elaine sort of created 3 separate groups of materials that became very apparent as we surveyed the materials that we received. First of all, there were her papers, things that were clearly created by Elaine in the course of her writing and her research, her career as a teacher, her work with the NAACP, and just her life growing up with her family and friends in Loudoun County and in Talbot County, Maryland. Those stood on their own. However, there were also papers from the Loudoun County Emancipation Association that she collected during her work with researching and writing in the watchfires. This book was a culmination of years of careful research, which Elaine did a lot of footwork to gather and preserve materials of the Loudoun County Emancipation Association. The Emancipation Association still meets today, I believe just 2 weekends ago, right? They had the annual celebration. That is a living organism, a living group. The papers that Elaine collected really represent the organization that existed up till 1971, when many of the original shareholders had passed away and the shares of the organization were turned in. So this collection that we created contains records from 1896 to 1971. It also contains materials that Elaine collected about the founding members of the organization. So along with minutes, letters to shareholders, speeches, membership lists, biographical and census information about LCA members, there's also everything from newspaper articles and financial reports to documentation of the emancipation grounds in Purcellville, both its activity when it is being actively used and was owned by the Loudoun County Emancipation Association, and also its later preservation, which Elaine and Beverly and many people played a role in. So here you can see the minutes of the first meeting of the directors of the Loudoun County Emancipation Association from 1910. And also the letterhead of the Emancipation Association that shows, it lists the directors, including Howard Clark, Elaine's grandfather, who was president, and also numerous other people who show up in Elaine's papers and who she researched. In the collection, and I'm not going to risk tripping over these wires, we have the organization's original ledgers, which are wonderful. And I invite you to come up after the presentation today and take a look, as well as everything. I think we may have every check that they ever cashed or had returned to them. We have the stock certificates that were turned in. So you can see the certificates that were issued to individuals that they kept. And many of them are really in great shape and beautifully designed. We also have a couple things of note. There are posters from Emancipation celebrations, and there are also posters from events that they sponsored, such as the Colton Horse Show. Photographs of LCEA members and other things that represent LCA, such as the artwork that artist Catherine A.B. Summers, another Loudoun County native, created for Elaine's book In the Watchfires. This is another short video clip from a television show that if you watched local cable in the early 90s, you might have seen, called On This Ground, where Elaine talks a little bit about the papers. So, and I keep hitting the wrong button. I'm very sorry. There we go.
Welcome back to On This Ground. We're speaking today with Elaine Thompson, who has written extensively about African American history in Loudoun County, and we're at the Balch Library, the Thomas Balch Library in Leesburg, Virginia. Elaine, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us exactly where we are? Give us a little orientation.
We're in the Howard Clark room, and incidentally, Howard Clark was my grandfather.
Wonderful.
And when the library was renovated, an anonymous donor gave money to have a room named in honor of an African American, and a search committee was formed.
When was this renovation?
This in 2000. Mm-hmm. Actually, it reopened in 2000. And there were 20 people nominated for the honor of having the room named. And because Howard Clark had worked so extensively in the community, working with school issue, both elementary and the formation of Douglas and the Countywide League. And because he had been a longtime officer of the Loudoun County Emancipation Association and performed other civic duties, he was selected for the honor.
And I understand he himself had brought a collection of memorabilia and documents and so forth.
Yes, fortunately, the association that he helped to found, which was the Loudoun County Emancipation Association in 1890, he was able to save the basic documents of that organization. So we have minute books and other documents going back to
And they're
1899.
deposited here at this library.
No, not yet.
Okay. It's in the future. Well, why don't you take a
So now they are. And I hope that Elaine and her grandfather Howard Clark would both be happy that the documents they preserved are now also being preserved in perpetuity. They're also accessible, so we look forward to having them available for researchers to come and look at and learn more about the Emancipation Association's early history. One thing that became very apparent as we went through the records and sorted and organized them was that there was a family tradition in Elaine's family of collecting information and preserving information about the past, and specifically about the community around their family. One thing that this was really clearly documented in were a collection of funeral program and other memorial materials that Elaine and her mother, Lillian Thompson, and I think also her daughters Dolores and Mildred, all actively collected. So there were these wonderful scrapbooks. I think it was 5 scrapbooks, I actually do not say, that they had collected every funeral program I think that they ever went to for every funeral. Some going back into the early 20th century. Included with this also were not just the programs or prayer cards or things like that, but also photographs of the deceased, both when they were living and at the time of their funeral. These scrapbooks, for their preservation, needed to be taken apart. Unfortunately, they had already degraded a little bit, and there's a lot of tape used to hold the materials in, and some of them had magnetic pages, which if you have photo albums from the 60s or 70s with the magnetic pages, you know that they stopped being sticky after a while. So to preserve the materials, we did take apart the scrapbooks, first documenting the arrangement of the materials, because sometimes they would have been put down in sort of a collage of a person's life and relationships. So within the collection, you see clippings with obituaries, programs that will include a photograph, and also in many cases a really wonderful tribute to the life of the individual who had passed. This collection is an amazing documentation of the community that Elaine and her family participated in, the people they knew, their church. And it also is full of amazing genealogical information that otherwise may not have been captured. So we all, I think, know, if you've done genealogical research, that funeral, obituary, and other such mourning materials provide lasting documentation of the life of an individual. It can tell us where they lived, where they worked, where they worshipped, all sorts of things, as well as giving us extended family names, dates of birth, relationships, education, employment, civic and church organizations they belong to. Amazing information that, particularly for people in the recent past and in communities that may have been affected, due to racism, by not being documented in a lot of mainstream papers. Some of these materials can be very unique and very valuable as social, historical, and genealogical records. This collection, since we have processed it, has been used numerous times already, even while we were still processing it, because someone would call and say, oh, do you have any information about this person? We'd be like, I don't know. something in their past would have some relevance to Elaine and her family. Perhaps they were from Hamilton, or they went to Mount Zion Church, and we would find that, in fact, yes, we did have their funeral program or an obituary. So it's already proved itself to be very useful, and I look forward to it being useful. Finally, the most, I'm trying to sum it up. The bulk of the collections we received ended up in the Elaine Thompson collection. And this collection, as I mentioned, consists of historical research and genealogical materials that Elaine collected. She collected a wide variety of materials about national African American history, the African American community in Loudoun County, but also about things she was interested in, which were many things. She was a writer. Some of you may know she was a creative writer, as well as being a writer of history. So some of her inspirations for writing. One thing that I love that we found in just one of her photo albums is she went to hear Gwendolyn Brooks speak, and she got Gwendolyn Brooks to inscribe something for her. The inclusive dates for this collection are 1890 to 2016, because it includes materials not only about or created by Elaine, but also materials created by her family or that she collected about history. Because the materials mostly relate to Elaine, the bulk of them come from between 1980 and 2016. Which is a lot of the time that she was doing her historical research and writing, looking at after her retirement. So to give you an idea of the types of things that we would find that provide information that is very helpful, Elaine participated in not just writing her books in the Watchfires and working with the Black History Committee as their publications committee chair, but also she produced numerous museum exhibits, both at the Loudoun County Museum and also at several churches. Sometimes she would have pop-up exhibits in various places. And she put a lot of work into researching these things. On the right, you see her sort of timeline of historic African American churches and mutual aid societies in Loudoun County. And this comes from her work for her book, Courage, My Soul, which was in conjunction with a museum exhibit. This is an amazing timeline that sort of puts all of these things in the perspective of when they were active. And it's actually quite large. I couldn't actually fit everything into the scan, but there is a copy of it upstairs. And it's a helpful document to kind of know like when different churches were established, when their records would start. On the left, you see a map of Hamilton that came from when Elaine was working on in the Watchfires, I think. I think. It's a little snippet, and you'll see it's clipped out of another book. And she's had someone go in and help her identify and remember where different people lived. So you can see where Howard Clark's home might have been, or there was an ice cream parlor, apparently. Different individual names in the community. This can be very helpful because often one of the things we have trouble with with 20th century records is actually identifying where people lived. It's not as easy as you would think. The phone books existed. That could be helpful after, say, 1940, but before that, it can be quite difficult in some cases to place things geographically in the community. Other things that I think are really valuable, Elaine did a lot of speaking, and she was an excellent public speaker, I think, and very memorable. And we have her scripts that she wrote, so her talking notes, and you can see where she made notes. And I will tell you, thanks to Megan's excellent work digitizing the VHS materials that we received with Elaine's collection, this speech for a presentation she did about In the Watchfires follows pretty exactly to what she ended up saying. I actually wanted to show that clip, but I decided not to because I wanted to show so many clips, so we elected not to show that. But she does, in fact, think the people in red in order, and she just speaks so well. You can tell the thought and careful consideration she put into her words. She was also a great narrative storyteller. Many of the materials in the collection do relate to her work writing and researching in the watchfires. We have individual files she collected about the founders. She has writing she did. We have plays she produced to help children sort of learn about the Emancipation Association, the history of civil rights and other topics. All very wonderful. And we also have many of the materials that she produced working with the Black History Committee. So for instance, here's the timeline that she created with Betty Moorfield, who she's pictured with here, and Bronwyn Souders. And I think this may be the photograph when she was receiving the, I'm actually not sure if that's when she received a history award or not. Because I see Betty Moorfield's name is on the plaque, so I don't think it is. I think they received an award. It's just a nice photo. So I think of the other materials that I have not mentioned or pictured here. The thing that is also very helpful is Elaine's collections related to African American church history. And I know Megan's going to talk a little bit about that with the photographic collections, so I'll let her do that. But I'd also like to reemphasize, as we've already talked about, the genealogical and biographical information that Elaine's papers have related to her family, particularly the larger families of the Trammell, Clark, Thompson, Nichols, and Robinson families, as well as other figures in Loudoun County history that she researched. All of these materials are very, I included a few letters up here of people thanking Elaine and giving her congratulations for things. And one key feature that comes across in almost everything I see is that she was a diligent, dedicated, and accurate researcher. And so she definitely took to heart the idea that you just don't take the first piece of information to prove something. You look for additional pieces of information to confirm that. And that comes across in her papers. So we have not just, a census record that shows that somebody lives somewhere. We have multiple records in addition to that she found. And of course, we all know that she was doing a lot of this research before the internet. So she did it after the internet as well to make sure that nothing would come up, to use the new resources and tools. It's very difficult to sum up how much is in this collection. The only thing I can do is to invite you to come and see it for yourself. And that is the thing that I think is most important. Elaine collected these materials and preserved them, and with the idea that they would be available for future researchers. And so please share the information about this collection, tell people about it, and come and see it yourself and bring people with you. Just before I turn it over to Megan, I'd like to encourage you to see the exhibit upstairs, which again gives you some additional snapshots into the materials that are available, and also to look at, after the presentation, some of the materials we pulled out for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Guides for these collections will be available on our website and upstairs in our reading room. They are not, with the exception of the Loudoun County Emancipation Association materials, available today on our website and upstairs because although we have been working on these for 6 years, there's still some tweaking with the guides we want to do. We want to live up to Elaine's example and make sure that everything is accurate and correct. And in fact, with the funeral and memorial materials, we did decide to change the name, which is one reason why that's not available yet. So I look forward to having those available before the end of October. And if anybody's interested, I would be happy to send you copies as soon as they are. But I'm going to turn this over to Megan Glassbrenner to tell you about the photographic materials.
Thank you. Okay, so the photographs obviously are the bulk of the visual collection. So I'm going to go into those in more detail in a second here. But the visual collection also has a lot of objects that relate really closely to what Laura just talked about in the manuscript portion of the collection. So as we mentioned, there's VHS and DVDs. These are mostly personal recordings that have a lot of information about Loudoun County community events, as well as a lot of events for Mount Zion United Methodist Church in Hamilton, which Elaine was obviously a very active member of. There's also, as you've seen, a couple clips of interviews with Elaine, presentations by Elaine, and other events that have to do with the Black History Committee, which we'll show you in a second here. There are a couple of professionally recorded DVDs as well. There are also objects in the visual collection. So these are miscellaneous items, including books, a lot of published materials, some which were gifted to Elaine that include inscriptions to her by the author. There's a family Bible, and there's other unique items in this portion of the visual collection, two of which I just want to highlight. The first one that you can see on the screen, and it's also on the table on the end over there, is a White House ID card, employee ID card for George W. Thompson, which is a really nice thing that we have in a tangible form. The other one is samples of wallpaper by Sheila Bridges. We have a couple samples of different sizes and different colors. And this is an example that we also have, as we mentioned, Elaine collected a lot of items that had to do with local history and her personal life, but also just cultural objects that had to do with African American culture and community. And this is a good example. She also has information on what inspired the design and the intention behind the design. So if you want to see that, that is also on the table up front as well. But as we mentioned, the bulk of the visual collection are the photographs. There are over 2,100 individual photos in the photographic collection. So we decided, because of that number, that dividing it into series based on the content of them was going to make them most easily accessible and most useful. So I'm going to go into detail on each of these series just to show you what's in the photos. And I think you'll start seeing a lot of overlap with what we were just talking about in the materials in the collection. So the first series we named General Loudoun County and Regional African American History. These were photos that we found that depicted historical individuals or events that at the time of categorizing them were not directly identified to be related to Elaine's family or her professional activities. This group includes both original photographs and reproductions, the contents of which span from approximately the 1880s to the 1960s. Significantly for this series, most of these images require some form of identification. A lot of them don't have any identifying information that accompanied them. So that's something that we've been getting some help with already, which has been really, really exciting. Several of these also need possible conservation. I'll show you an example of that in a second as well, mostly due to the age of a lot of these photographs. It's important to note that some of these photographs, when we get identifications for them, we may reveal that they are members of Elaine's extended family. So they may be recategorized at a later time based on those identifications. But for now, that's where these are sitting. So this first example is an example of a photograph that immediately you can see is one of our, this probably needs some conservation. There's some cracking and some damage to the photograph itself. There was obviously tape at one point attached to the bottom of it. But the matting around it, which you can see a bit in this reproduction, is probably the most concerning part. It's a little brittle. It is breaking apart if you touch it too much. So that's something that at the very least, we really want to get it stabilized, because this is clearly a really great resource to have in the collection. This is also an example of a photo that we have no identification for. We don't know any of the individuals in the photo. We don't know the location, the occasion that may have, led to the photograph being taken. So any of that information would be really exciting for us to have. That being said, not all the photographs in the series are in need of conservation. This is a photo that is obviously in really good condition. The matting is clearly still all in place and the photo is really well preserved, but it is also an example of a photo that we don't have identification for. So this is a really well-preserved photograph that we would love to have some information on. It'd be really helpful. This series has a lot more photos like this, and there are a few examples on the table if you want to take a look when we're done with the presentation. Moving on, Series 2 covers Loudoun County churches. So this is where we see Elaine's depiction of historical places, people, or items that are related specifically to the historical church communities in Loudoun County. We also have here photographs that depict events that took place at these historical congregations, as well as more contemporary events at Mount Zion in Hamilton. Obviously, there's a lot of photographs from Mount Zion covering a lot of different important milestones, like the 110th anniversary. There's a lot of photographs from those celebrations. For this series, most of the locations and buildings are identified. So we actually know what most of the churches are. We know where most of them are located. But some of the specific events and a lot of the individuals in them are what's going to require identification. So to give you kind of a glimpse, there's extensive photographs in this collection of more recent photographs of historic churches throughout Loudoun County. So the one on the left is John Wesley Methodist in Waterford. And there's multiple photographs of these exteriors from different angles to kind of give a good overview. And the one on the right is Asbury Methodist in Hillsborough. What's also nice in this collection is we also have photographs for a lot of these churches of the cornerstones with dates on them. So there's a lot of really good documentation in the photographs alone to give you some background on, when was this church built? This is when it was, reconstructed. So there's a lot of really good information in here on these really important historic communities and historic buildings. The other bulk of this, as I said, is Mount Zion in Hamilton. There's a lot of photographs of Mount Zion from a lot of different time periods, which is really exciting, as well as Elaine's personal involvement with the community. But what we don't have is a lot of identification of so many of the individuals in these photographs. For example, the photo on the bottom, the only identification we have just says United Methodist Women. There's no identification of any of the individuals. We know Elaine is in the photo in the back right of the photograph. You can see her. So aside from that, I don't know why she's standing in the back. But aside from that, we don't know any of the other people immediately in the photograph. So that's something that we're really hoping to be able to get some identifications for. And once we get them for one, hoping to be able to obviously extend those into a lot of the other photos in the collection. There's a lot of photographs as well of exhibits at Mount Zion, including ones with artifacts relating to the history of the church. So there's a lot of information in the photographs that complements a lot of the documentation in the manuscript collection as well. The third series is related to the Black History Committee and the Friends and Elaine's work with them. So this definitely extends the information in the manuscript collection and the information in the VHS materials in the visual collection as well. These depict events, exhibits, programs, anything that's related to Elaine's contributions to the library and her involvement with the Black History Committee. We have a lot of information on these, obviously. What we're missing is some of the specific events. So for example, there are a lot of photographs in here of details of the Let Our Rejoicing Rise exhibit, which is fantastic because the VHS also has programs and tour information for this exhibit. So this is really well documented if we wanted to be able to reference this. What we don't have is information on some of the other events. So for example, we know that is Elaine speaking at that podium. What we don't know is what the event was, what she was speaking at, where she was. On the right, once again, Elaine is getting an award. We don't know what the award was, and we aren't quite sure of all of the individuals in these photographs. So that's the kind of information that if we could get that identification would really round out this series, which is largely probably one of the most complete in terms of information. So if anybody knows any information about any of these, we would love to have it. This is also, as I said, the VHSs include a lot of exhibits and programs that Elaine did for the Black History Committee. So this is a short clip of the beginning of a talk that she gave in 2004 to a meeting of the Black History Committee, just so you can see a little bit of that overlap as well. And also see Elaine speak again.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure of introducing to you one of Loudoun's own, one of Loudoun's very special ladies, retired teacher, and also a member of the Black History Committee. And that to me is most important, Miss Elaine Thompson.
Thank you. I commend the Loudoun Public Library for hosting this seminar. And I wasn't given a specific topic or even told to use all deliberate speech. But with all the media coverage we've had over the last few weeks and this morning's program, especially the film, you're probably wondering what else can be said about Brown that I don't already know. And for some of you, I'm sure that's true. But I plan to take a slightly different tack. I hope to connect some of the things, the personalities, the techniques, and events to Loudoun County, and to show you that the momentous Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, did not happen in a vacuum, but was the culmination of decades of meticulous research and protest. It is impossible, at least in my mind, to have any meaningful discussion of civil rights, especially.
Okay, so again, that's an example of the whole speech is in, her whole talk is in the VHS, and that is something that's available in the collection. So we have those resources as well in both the photographs and also in the DVD, audiovisual parts of the collection. Series 4 is the largest bulk of the photographs. So this is the personal photographs. Because of how many of these there were, we decided to divide it into 3 smaller groupings because we noticed that there were 3 main areas of Elaine's life that were highlighted here. The first one was her career as a teacher, which obviously, as we've mentioned, is something that was really important to her. The second one was actually traveling that she did. She traveled quite a bit to a lot of really, really interesting places. And then the third one is the extensive photographs of her family. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of each of these to give you an idea of what these personal glimpses into Elaine's life are available in the visual collection. So as I said, subseries 1 is Elaine Thompson, teacher. They are photos that depict her job as a teacher. There's photographs of her in her classroom. There are those photographs they take of the teachers every year that go in the yearbooks. There are photographs of her classes of students. So you can see the different types of classes that she had. There's photos of her working with classes, doing preparations for, I believe it was a play that she was working with her classes on. And there's also photographs of students, so like graduation photos that were given to Elaine as a gift. And these are probably one of the best parts of this series. It gives us such a glimpse into how Elaine was viewed by her students as a teacher. So we have the photographs, and then on the right of each of these is what's written on the backs of these photographs. They're personal inscriptions to Miss Thompson from her graduating students that show you just how valued she was and how she was viewed. And I think, if nothing else from this series, these are the parts that I think are probably the most exciting to have, because they tell you how much she loved what she was doing and how much she was appreciated by her students. And there's actually a lot of these, which is really, really nice to have. Subseries 2 is Elaine Thompson Travels, and this is where we put all of her travel photos. These are photographs from all of the trips that she took, both internationally. She went to, there's extensive photos from Kenya, Israel, and Spain, as well as domestic sites that she visited, mostly while she was attending NAACP conventions over the years. So these photos on this slide are both from her trip to Kenya. She took it in 1996 in conjunction with a trip to Israel. Both of these trips were clearly really important to Elaine because they were, of all the travel photos, the only ones that were contained in albums. They were both in albums with inscriptions next to the photographs, identifications of things. These were clearly really significant trips for her, and there's some fantastic images of the sites that she saw and her posing with individuals. I think there's a picture on the table from the Israel trip of Elaine as well, so if you want to see that. The domestic sites obviously are all over the country. This is from one of the NAACP conventions she traveled to Los Angeles for. And the top photo gives you an example of, there are pictures from the conventions themselves. That is Oprah in the red on the panel. And on the bottom are some of the sites, example of some of the sites that she visited during these travels. They cover a lot of time. They're not all condensed to one decade. There's a lot of periods of time. So you can see the different types of trips that she took, and you can see the different things in the conventions that were significant to her as well. This was clearly an important trip to her as well because it was also separated with identifications. So this was clearly one of the more exciting trips that she took. That being said, not all of the identifications are necessarily the clearest. In the album for the Kenya photos, there were lots of really helpful identifications of the safari that she went on. If anyone can help us with what beverage monkey refers to, we would love help with that.
Really hoping it's a monkey that brings you beverage.
Yes, that's what we're hoping. But that being said, if anyone has any help, that would be helpful. But largely, most of these identifications really gave us a glimpse into what these sites were and why they were important to Elaine. Subseries 3 is Elaine Thompson Family, and this is the bulk of the personal collection. in the visual collection. It depicts family events. It depicts individuals that were close to Elaine, family reunions, holidays, weddings, just everyday photos of family and friends, Christmas cards, letters with pictures that were sent to her. It's an extensive coverage. It spans early 1900s to the 2010s and covers probably every type of photograph you could possibly think of from that time period. This is a fantastic resource into Elaine's personal life and into that genealogy and history of her family and the community that goes with what's in the manuscript collection. So this is an example. This is Elaine's Aunt Sarah Boyd from 1934. This photo is in fantastic condition. It's a beautiful photograph, and it has an inscription written on it with a date. It has a dedication. So it gives us not only just a glimpse into the time period and her family, it gives us a glimpse into relationships as well. And there's a lot of photographs in this series that have that type of information. There's also photographs, obviously, for extended family. It's not just Elaine's immediate family. So this is really a valuable resource. There are also a lot of photographs from family reunions, and there's a lot of photographs of extended family. So that being said, this is also a place we need help with identifications. These are two photographs from the 1978 Clark Thompson family reunion. There are tons of photographs from these family reunions. We know a small handful of the individuals in the photographs. We know that, for example, the top left photo, we can see Lillian, Elaine's mother. Yes, please, someone take a closer look. No, go ahead. And we have this wonderful group photograph where we can identify Elaine in the front left, and that's about it. So if we have any help identifying any of these extensive family groups, that would be wonderful. We're slowly starting to be able to piece together. I'll find one photograph with identifications, then we can go back and add them in.
No, maybe. I might be one of the babies, but I don't think so.
That would be fantastic. But there's photographs from all different time periods. This is a 1978 reunion. We have 2004 reunions. We have tons and tons of examples of family being really important to Elaine, and a lot of photos of her enjoying time with her family, which is really probably one of the most exciting things about this sub-series. So that is the visual collection, and I love that.
This is by far, I think, everybody who's worked on the collection's favorite photo of Elaine, just in that it's the suit and the expression, the whole thing. But I would like to say, to add to what Megan said, our plan and in process, all of the photographs will be digitized. Many have already been digitized. Once we have completed the cataloging, they will eventually, it'll be a little while, uploaded into our online catalog, which will make it easier for people to look at and identify and view them. The reason that'll take a little while is, more than 2,000 photographs. Each one we have to go and attach the image to the file. But Megan's excellent work cataloging them is going to make this much easier. So she's already put several hundred photos. 300 photos into the online catalog that are will be viewable as soon as I click a button and upload them. I'm really hoping that people will be able to view them, will find themselves or their siblings and family members and let us know. We're also really interested in getting things identified. So if you are interested in helping, or if you definitely with Elaine's family, we'd be happy to do whatever we can to get these photographs identified. Because the problem with an unidentified photograph is it's visually stunning and appealing and can tell us a lot from what we can observe. But those names, they need to be given to us by people who know who those people are. And then that adds volumes to the information available. But yeah, so thank you very much, Megan, for that great running tour. And I hope one thing that's become apparent from this presentation is that the wealth of material here makes it difficult for us to identify everything. As we were talking, I'm like, oh, we should have mentioned this. Oh, we should have mentioned this. So I hope that you will take time to explore what's out, to ask us questions, and also to come in and take a look at these materials. And please spread the word. So thank you very much for coming today. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
up, Courtney? How you doing? I'm doing good, brother. Good to see you. Good to meet you. Bernice, how you doing? And Jason.
Oh, I did. Thanks.
Excuse me. I'd just like to say, this is Elaine's son. Elaine's aunt, she's almost 102. And this is Howard Clark's daughter. It's awesome. May God bless you with those genes.
Wow.